First round of AP European History online video notes. We're going to start off in Unit 1 with the Renaissance, and I'm going to try to walk you through some of the basics before we get going here. At the beginning of each unit, I have a few questions, content checks, where after you have went through the section of content, you should know what these things are. So you always, whenever you start a new video segment, you need to take a look at these questions, stop, make sure you have an idea of what you're looking for, and then at the end, make sure you can go back and actually answer them. All I'm going to say is that they will be, it will be beneficial to you to actually know what the answers might be. As a bonus, these questions will probably also contain a lot of vocabulary words and usually at least one possibility for a short answer on a test. So here we go. At the beginning of the notes, there's an overview in this section, just exactly what will be the new material. Please note that we have to talk a little bit about the Middle Ages so that you can understand what the Renaissance, why it was such a big deal, what really happened to it, and how it was influenced by what came before it. And I have highlighted on the screen here for you a few of the, again, major questions that you should see and will usually end up as short answer questions. So the crisis of the late Middle Ages. Now, you've been given in class a packet that has fill-in-the-blank notes. As you go through, please make sure you're filling those in and reviewing those. And I take a lot of test questions from these notes. And you are, at this point, responsible for anything in these notes. I won't speak about every single thing in these notes in class, so it is crucial that you sit down, you go through the video, and you listen to these lectures so that you can pick up on the things that might be test questions. I'm going to help you along the way by stressing things, stopping and talking about them in these notes that will be crucial later. So please fill in your blanks as we go through. Start off in with Europe in the 6th century. Just taking a look at this map, there are very few things on here that you could probably pick out as actual European countries, things that we see today anyway. Countries such as Britain should look familiar, Spain, maybe even possibly the Byzantine Empire. But the rest of it is really kind of uncharted territory. And Europe is going to change quite a bit when we jump up to 1492, getting more into our time period. It's starting to look a little bit more like the Europe that we're used to seeing. Maybe you're still not quite familiar with what that Holy Roman Empire is. You will be by the time we're done with Unit 1 and definitely Unit 2. And again, if you look down there in Spain, in Spanish class, hopefully you've talked about in your culture sections how Castile and Aragon were two separate places and how they were united, of course, under the infamous Isabella and Ferdinand, and you know kind of the background story to that. If you don't, hey, go ask your Spanish teacher or stay tuned. We're going to talk about it and you're going to get a glimpse of that when you do Renaissance people and learn all about Isabella. Other places to note on this map would be the Ottoman Empire over there on the right. Papal states, where Italy is currently located. One of the things we're going to be talking about in the Renaissance sections is why are they the papal states? How come they're not Italy? And of course it won't even become Italy until we get into the 1800s. Habsburg lands. The Habsburgs are going to be prominent characters in our story. And if you look up at Scotland, Wales, Ireland, and England, hey, at least those things look somewhat familiar. Look all the way up in the top right-hand corner, and you've got the Principality of Moscow. Notice it says nothing about Russia yet. So we've got a lot of changes still yet to come on our map. Now, whenever we first start off with the Renaissance, as I had previewed before, we got to figure out how the Middle Ages led to the Renaissance. So there's a few things that you need to understand. That in the 1300s, there was a great famine. A little ice age had brought all the rain, the crops were gone, people were starving. Poor nutrition made people susceptible to diseases. If you're not eating healthily, you're not eating well, then hey, your disease, your susceptibility, your probability of getting sick goes up. Also, the prices of the food were just out of control. Even though they did try to control it with price controls, the food was just too expensive, what little they had. So again, people were starving. That, of course, is going to lead to people looking around for someone to blame. Who can we blame for this starvation, for the bad things that are happening to us? And not for the first time in history, and it won't be the last time. We see that the Jewish community is blamed. The lepers, if you've you might know what that's from if you've possibly had that story in Christian Bible school. We'll chat about that in class if you like. Ask me about the lepers. And of course the wealthy, eating up all the food. So as people looked around, they were looking for someone to blame, and there's always somebody handy to blame for things that are going wrong. The Black Death. We're going to talk about this at great length in class. I'm actually going to go through a lot of this with you, so I don't want to talk too much about it since that will be featured in class. But again, it comes over from Asia. It comes over on the rats that have the fleas that have the disease, and hopefully you're remembering back to the video song that you watched about fleas on rats. So there are different kinds of the disease, but it was typically boil forms. Then there's vomiting, death. 30 to 60% of European population, depending on where you're at in Europe, are going to die. So again, a lot of people like to say 60%. It sounds, really, really bad, which of course it was. And it's going to completely change the infrastructure and change the social system and way of life for Europe at this time. So huge impact the Black Death has. The Jewish community is going to be attacked again, saying, they've brought this to them, or maybe if we kicked out all the Jews, we wouldn't have got sick. God would not have inflicted the Black Death upon us. For you science-y type folks, here you go. A little flow chart for you so you can see what's going on with the transmission of the disease. And as you can tell, basically it's vomit that eventually gets regurgitated into the human blood system, and now we've got infection. We'll take a look at some of these different pictures in class. The bulbous form versus systemic. If you've got systemic, you're in trouble. Bulbous, they might actually be able to do something for you. Consequences of the plague, and this is really what we're worried about here, is that labor is going to become expensive because there aren't as many people to actually do the work, and a lot of workers are needed. This is, however, going to benefit those special set of people, the artisans and guilds, because now they're really going to be able to specialize, and they're going to be able, the guilds and the artisans are going to be able to kind of decide what they want to get paid, and if they've got the skill and the craft, then you have to pay them for whatever specialty they have. If they're bricklayers, you need something built, you've got to pay the guilds. That also means they can be choosy on who they induct into the system, who they train. So it was a very prestigious thing if you were a member of the guild, and they start to become their own subset of people, which needs time out here for just a second, talking about social classes. As you guys know, the three principal things we're going to be focusing on in this class are going to be political things, economic things, and then the social, how people interact with other people, and social classes. At this time, you've really just got the uppers and the lowers. There's not a whole lot of middle ground, and that's one of the things that the Renaissance starts to become known for, is that you start to develop a small set of people who manage to get a leg up, make a little bit more money. They're not quite as high as lords and nobles or kings, but they do have a little bit more money, a little bit more prestige, and these folks are going to eventually make up their own merchant class, or middle class, and we'll see how that plays out with the Renaissance when we get to the Medicis. Many priests are going to die with the plague, and they're actually going to encourage the endowments of new colleges because of this. But unfortunately, and this is where it kind of starts to make hopefully a little bit of sense, if the plague is a disease sent down from God, and priests are dying, what should be the common conclusion here? If you said, hold on a second, that means the priests might be doing something bad too, well then give yourself a gold star for the day. Because as more and more priests get sick, people have been told that you're a sinner, God has done this to you, brought a plague upon your house. And the priests are getting sick, well, what does that mean about the priests? So people start to question, people start to look at the priests during this time period and say, maybe they're not as good, maybe they're not as pure or godly as we thought. And that's going to lead to a whole bunch of other dominoes falling into place for this Renaissance thing. On your screen here, we've actually got a vocabulary word where we talk about flagellants, and that is not to be confused with flatulence. But the flagellants are going to be extremely devout members of the church, extremely devout believers who are going to perform certain rites, certain actions that kind of show that that level of devout worship. We'll get to that here again in a minute. And during this time period, again, another consequence will be a morbid obsession with death. It's going to be all throughout the art and literature of Middle Ages and the late Middle Ages, because again, death is just everywhere, so it's a prime source of motivation and inspiration. So the psychology of the Black Death, again, blaming the Jews or other certain groups. Most folks are going to start to lose hope across Europe. Artist obsession with death, and then, of course, that flagellantism. We're going to talk about that specifically in class, so I'm not going to give too much away. But if you want to be prepared for class, take a look at that picture and try to pick out all the things that you see in that picture. Don't leave anything out, because we're going to do an activity with that in class. You may have actually seen or had some exposure with flagellants before. There is actually a movie called The Da Vinci Code that features this type of person and what they actually do. Death in art, again, you can see more pictures that feature what exactly is going on with the artwork and death. You can go and see this in Croatia at Church of St. Mary of the Rocks in Istria, Croatia. So again, getting back to the role that and the consequence of blaming Jews during this time period, a lot of pogroms, and that is another vocabulary word, so make sure that you look that one up. A lot of pogroms are going to be started against the Jews, and I'm not leaving out the R, it's not program or anything like that. Pogrom, check that vocabulary word out. And if I were to ask you, very simply, if I were to ask you, okay, when the Jews are persecuted, what symbol did they have to wear? Everybody would, of course, say, you're saying this stuff out loud with me, right, while you watch these things? You would, of course, say the Jewish star. But again, it didn't always start. That was a little bit later, and Jewish persecution did not start just with Hitler. As you can see on the screen, they had to wear a golden circle, as pointed here on the PowerPoint, are also, and again, there's really kind of no other way to put this, a Jew hat. It kind of looks like an upside down funnel. So if you've seen The Wizard of Oz and the Tin Man, he's got that upside down funnel on the top of his head. This is also something we can see in old art of the Jewish community. But again, going back to the whole point here, it was just another way to point out, hey, these are Jews, and to persecute this one community. So we talked about the Black Death, and you will be receiving in class daily questions about the 100 Years' War. I'm going to give you a video that you can use. It's a quick one that you can use to take a look at what happened with the 100 Years' War, and it kind of breaks it down. Or you can come back to these notes and listen to my breakdown. But essentially, it's going to start as a dispute over inherited land claims. And this is kind of beautiful because it's fought primarily in France. It's between France and English monarchs. But essentially, we're not quite there yet. England's going to be an early winner because they've got some newer technology, but then later on, French troops are going to rally around the famous figure Joan of Arc. She's going to change the course of the war, and France is going to end up turning out to be the winner. Now, as you can see, there's quite a lot here, and if you want to plow through it to get more of a play-by-play of what happened with the 100 Years' War, you are more than welcome to do so. But the bottom line is the French king's going to die, and because everybody is related, because royals only marry royals, right? Because everybody is related, the King of England says, you know what? Since I'm sorta kinda in the line of the throne, in line for the throne over in France, I'm just gonna name myself the French king and rule both territories. Only problem is the actual guy in line is going to take a little bit of exception to that. So they're going to fight the 100 Years' War. Now notice the time frame is a little bit more than 100 years. Don't let that freak you out. And we're going to take a look at a map in class that kind of shows the flow of the war. If you want to go through all the different kings and learn them, hey, go right ahead. I'm telling you don't necessarily need them. All you need to know is what really happened because of the 100 Years' War, the consequences that we saw on a previous slide, and some others we're going to talk about now. So you can go through and you can take a look, and hopefully the video, if I remember correctly, it's going to take you through how the long bow actually helped make a difference when they were fighting the crossbow. Joan of Arc and her role in all of this should also be talked about in the video. She's kind of a fun story to talk about. Her problem was, of course, that she wore pants. Not really, but we'll chat about that in class. Consequences of war, again, this is the major thing that you want to make sure you understand for the AP Euro test. That this sense of nationalism is going to take root. Intense feeling of national pride and unity. So I'm no longer a subject of Baron Smith. I'm no longer necessarily just a vassal of Lord so-and-so. I'm English, and we English are going to fight together to take down those French. And one leader's going to emerge, and that person's going to be the king. He's going to unite all of the fighters, and he's going to maintain an army, which, by the way, costs a lot of money. But he's going to maintain that army during this time period, so things start to change in the culture and the expectation of being English as opposed to living on a feudal manor. The knight or the lord and baron taking care of you while you're a peasant is going to kind of go to the wayside as they unite to become one country. So during the 100 Years' War, the economies are both going to suffer, and the government structures, the political structures, are going to start to lose their own power, and they're also going to tax the people quite extensively, especially in France. But one of the major things, and most importantly down there, they move towards a strong, centralized, hereditary monarchy. So they're going to replace the feudal way of life, or the manorial way of life, and start to move more towards a king type of political structure. Decline of the church prestige is going to be prompted by the Great Schism, and we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that in class and with some diagrams. You're going to watch a video on the decline of the church. Those page numbers, by the way, page 393, if it doesn't talk about Babylonian captivity, it's because it's the old textbook and it hasn't been updated. So don't panic that you got the wrong place. And again, this is one of those things where you can go through the whole history of the different popes and figure out what happened if you would like between Urban and the new Pope Clement. And again, these are some sexy men right here with these pictures. But we're going to talk about it in class. And essentially, they're both going to think that they're both right. And Clement is going to take over because the cardinals are going to choose him. Now, this is a secret pope. So while Urban is a pope and has been rightfully elected, the cardinals are going to hate him. They're going to go off. They're going to elect a different pope. And now we've got two popes. So think about this for a second. This is supposed to be the one man on earth that is God's voice on earth. And now we've got two. So, on top of that, or this, on top of the fact that the Black Plague has struck the priests as well, the people of this time period are really starting to have their doubts about the church. So, here is the end of content check number 1. Please make sure you can go back and answer all of those questions.